desert has always been a graveyard for truth. Somewhere beyond the Valley of the Kings, where wind erases every footprint by dawn, lay a stretch of earth the locals called Sara al-Maut, the desert of death. The Bedouins said no shadow lingered there after sunset, and that even the jackals refused to howl. Beneath that black sand slept the name Egypt itself had tried to forget, Akhenaten, the pharaoh who defied the gods, and in doing so, became something monstrous. But the sands never keep their dead. In the spring of 1894, under a blistering sun, a British archaeologist named Dr. Alistair Fenwick led an excavation deep into that forbidden desert. His men, Egyptians hired from Luxor, worked with trembling hands. For 3 weeks they had dug through layers of limestone and sand, uncovering nothing but bones and broken shards of pottery. Then, one morning, a pickaxe struck something solid. It was not stone. It was black granite, smooth as glass, veined like muscle. When they brushed away the sand, glyphs appeared, not carved but burned into the surface, as if scorched by divine fire. "This isn't a tomb," whispered Fenwick, running his gloved hand over the strange markings. "It's a seal." Nadir, his Egyptian foreman, made the sign of the cross and stepped back. "We must not open it, ya doctor. This is not a place of kings." But Fenwick's eyes gleamed with feverish delight. "Nonsense. This could be the lost burial site of Akhenaten himself." The others froze. Even the wind seemed to pause at that name. For in Egypt, Akhenaten was not remembered as a ruler, but as a curse. That night, Fenwick sat by his lantern, flipping through pages of his journal filled with rough sketches of the slab's inscriptions. He had recognized the glyph of the Aten, the radiant sun disk once worshipped under Akhenaten's reign. But there were others, darker symbols interwoven between the rays, writhing serpents, inverted ankhs, and the eye of reversal, an ancient sign of blasphemy. "These aren't hymns," Fenwick murmured. "They're warnings." In one corner a line of text read, "He who ascended by sin shall never die, for the gods tore out his name, but not his breath." Outside, the desert howled. The wind carried a low hum, almost like chanting. The workers huddled around the fires, whispering prayers to Osiris and Anubis. They knew the stories, how Akhenaten had turned against Egypt's gods, commanding that every temple but his own be torn down. How he had renamed the capital Amarna, dedicated only to Aten, the one true sun. But what the scrolls never told, what priests dared not record, was that Akhenaten's quest for godhood had gone far beyond worship. He had sought to merge with the divine, and to do so, he had turned to rites too obscene for the living. Fenwick didn't believe in curses, but as he read those glyphs, the lantern flame began to tremble violently, flickering blue. Somewhere beneath the earth, something sighed. By the second night, curiosity had consumed him. Against Nadir's protests, Fenwick ordered the men to break open the granite slab. It took 6 hours of hammering before the stone cracked, releasing a gush of air that smelled of myrrh and rot. The workers stumbled back, choking. From within came a sound, faint, like the distant beating of a heart. Torchlight revealed a narrow stairway spiraling down into blackness. The walls were carved with scenes not found in any temple. A pharaoh kneeling before a burning sun, his shadow transforming into something with wings. Beneath his feet, human figures writhed, their mouths open in silent screams. "Dear God," Fenwick breathed. He painted himself as the creator. The steps led into a circular chamber perfectly preserved. In its center stood a sarcophagus of obsidian, etched with more warnings. "May no mortal open this vessel, for within sleeps the unending." But the lid was not sealed with wax or rope. It was sealed with blood, dark and petrified. Fenwick leaned closer, tracing his finger over the dried crimson. It pulsed faintly under his touch. "Alive," he whispered. "Still alive." The torches guttered out. That night, Fenwick dreamed, or believed he dreamed. He stood in a vast courtyard of polished white stone, the city of Amarna, restored in impossible perfection. The air shimmered with gold, and priests in linen robes sang hymns to the blazing Aten overhead. At the far end of the court stood Akhenaten himself, tall, gaunt, his elongated skull crowned with gold, his eyes glowing like molten amber. "You have found me," the Pharaoh said in a voice that vibrated through Fenwick's bones. You seek truth in dust, but I am truth. I am the light. Fenwick fell to his knees. You're dead. History erased you. Akhenaten smiled, and his teeth were black. The gods feared me. They burned my temples, shattered my name, but I transcended them. Through the flesh of the innocent, through the breath of the dying. Sin is the bridge between man and God, and I walked it alone. The sunlight around him darkened. The priests began to scream as their skin peeled away, turning into ash that swirled upward into the Pharaoh's mouth. His body expanded, radiant veins bursting with gold and blood. Worship me, Akhenaten whispered, or join them. Fenwick woke gasping, his skin slick with sweat. His nose bled onto the pages of his journal, and the lines of glyphs seemed to shift, rearranging themselves into a single sentence. The one who gazes upon the son of sin shall never see darkness again. He didn't sleep after that. By morning, Nadir noticed something strange. When Fenwick stepped into the sunlight, his skin glimmered faintly as if dusted with gold. A small burn had appeared on his wrist, the same symbol as the eye within the sun, the mark of a 10. Doctor, Nadir pleaded, the dead are speaking to you. You must leave this place, but Fenwick only smiled in his cold, hollow smile. We are on the verge of rewriting history. The world will know the truth of Akhenaten, not as a heretic, but as a god. That afternoon the men packed their things. No one would follow him down again. Fenwick descended alone into the tomb, clutching his lantern, its glow trembling on the walls. He reached the sarcophagus and laid his hands on the lid. It was warm. Show me, he whispered. Show me eternity. With one last push, the lid shifted open, and a burst of light engulfed him, brighter than the sun itself. Outside, Nadir heard the echo of a scream that wasn't human. When he and two brave men returned with torches, they found the chamber empty. The sarcophagus stood open, and the inside was lined with fresh blood. Fenwick's notebook lay nearby. One final sentence scrawled across the page. The Pharaoh lives in the sun that burns beneath the sand. There are gods born from light, and others forged from the darkness that light casts. Before his name became a curse, before the priests called for his erasure, Akhenaten was Egypt's chosen son, the one the gods were said to have kissed upon the brow at birth. But even the divine touch can scorch when the soul beneath it hungers for more than worship. This is how a pharaoh tried to become a god. In the 14th century BCE, the Nile flooded like a river of mirrors, reflecting a sky as red as blood. Inside the palace of Amenhotep III, a child was born, frail, long-faced, and silent. The midwives whispered that he did not cry, that he simply stared at the torchlight with unblinking golden eyes. The priests of Amun hailed it as a sign. The boy sees the divine, they said. The flame does not burn him. Years passed. While other princes trained in chariots and war, Amenhotep IV, as he was first named, spent hours alone, watching the sun from the palace terraces until his skin blistered. He said he could hear it, that the sun spoke to him humming softly like a heartbeat in the sky. When his father died, Amenhotep IV ascended the throne. But the boy who gazed too long into the sun had already gone blind to all but one vision, a world lit only by a 10, the single burning god of the sun's face. In his second year as pharaoh, he ordered the priests of Amun to close their temples. There shall be no gods but the sun, he declared, his voice trembling with a strange fire, for it is the Aten who breathes life into man, not statues, not idols, not the shadowed dead. His courtiers bowed in silence, but their eyes whispered fear. He changed his name from Amenhotep, Amun is satisfied, to Akhenaten, he who serves the Aten. And as if to prove his devotion, he ordered a new capital to be built on untouched ground, a shining city of alabaster and gold named Akhetaten, the horizon of the sun. It was said the first stones were laid under a blood-red dawn. Thousands of slaves dragged massive limestone blocks through the sand, their backs bleeding under the whips. Musicians played flutes to drown their cries, and high priests anointed the foundations with oil and human blood, said to be taken from virgins sacrificed at the altar of the rising sun. Light is born only through pain, Akhenaten said, and through pain, we become divine. His queen Nefertiti was unlike any woman Egypt had seen. Statues depicted her as perfect, slender neck, sculpted lips, eyes that held both serenity and sorrow. Yet the truth whispered through palace corridors was that she shared her husband's fever. Together they spent nights in the great temple, stripped of golden robes, bathed in sunlight filtered through red glass. Priests recorded strange ceremonies, the Pharaoh and his queen lying side by side as the light seared their skin, chanting hymns that spoke of merging flesh with flame. In one papyrus, now lost, a scribe wrote, "They sought not worship of Aten, but union." He believed that through the burning his body would ascend, his soul consumed and remade in fire. At first the people rejoiced. The temples of Akhenaten glittered, and offerings of gold poured in from conquered lands. But as the seasons passed, the sun above Egypt grew cruel. Crops withered, children fainted in the heat, and every morning, Akhenaten climbed the temple steps to watch the smoke of burned sacrifices rise like incense into the dawn. He smiled as if each scream were a prayer. Behind the golden altars of Akhenaten, there were rooms no outsider was allowed to see. Rooms carved deep beneath the temple, where the priests of Aten performed rites forbidden by tradition. There, the Pharaoh's chosen children, boys and girls taken from noble families, were anointed with sacred oil and sealed in chambers filled with sunlight, reflected by mirrors of bronze. For 7 days they were not fed nor given water. They were told that if their hearts were pure, the Aten would embrace them and make them eternal. None survived. When their bodies were brought up, their skin was burned black and their eyes fused shut. Akhenaten called them the Ascended. He ordered their mummified remains placed in crystal coffins beneath the temple floor. One night, Nefertiti descended those stairs to find him there, kneeling before the transparent coffins, his hands slick with blood. "They are still warm," he murmured. "I feel the god moving within them." Nefertiti recoiled. "You promised no more." Akhenaten turned to her, eyes glowing with a fevered light. "Aten demands devotion, and devotion is measured in flesh." When she tried to leave, he caught her wrist, and for a moment, his face seemed to flicker between human and something molten, his features dissolving in the dim light. "Do not fear the light, my queen," he whispered. "It will make us whole." By Akhenaten's 9th year as pharaoh, Egypt was collapsing. The Nile refused to flood. Fish floated dead on the water's surface, bellies up and blistered. Farmers found their livestock blinded. Even the cats sacred to Bastet fled the city. And yet the temples of Aten burned brighter than ever. Every night priests carried torches through the streets chanting, "Aten is the breath, Aten is the blood." In the palace, courtiers began to vanish. Some said they were taken for illumination. Others whispered that the pharaoh had found a way to feed the sun itself. Then came the festival of the living god, the ceremony that would seal his fate. Under a sky of copper and ash, the people gathered in the square of Akhenaten. The great statue of Akhenaten towered above them, its face stretched unnaturally as though melted by heat. Drums thundered. Incense filled the air. Akhenaten appeared on the balcony, clothed in gold so bright it blinded those who looked up. Nefertiti stood beside him, pale and trembling. "Behold the Aten sun," cried the high priest. "Behold he who has become divine." The crowd bowed as Akhenaten raised his hands. A great bronze mirror behind him caught the sunlight, focusing it into a single burning beam that fell upon the altar below. There 50 chosen youths knelt, their heads bowed. Through their flesh the pharaoh intoned, "The sun shall feed upon us all." He lowered his scepter. The mirror shifted. The light ignited the altar. The screams rose, long, piercing, and endless. The smell of burning flesh spread through the square like perfume. Nefertiti turned away, tears streaming down her face. "Enough," she shouted. "You are not a god." But Akhenaten only laughed, a sound like cracking stone. "The gods denied me," he said, "so I have become one." That night the first of the plagues struck. The moon vanished, leaving the sky in unnatural darkness. The palace torches burned blue. In the reflection of every pool the sun still blazed. Though the heavens were black, priests began to die, their bodies hollowed, their skin glistening like gold leaf. When they tried to bury them, the corpses bled liquid light. Nefertiti locked herself in her chambers. The servants whispered that her husband no longer ate or slept, that he stood naked in the temple all night whispering to the light. "He says the Aten has entered him," one servant cried, "that he is no longer man." The next morning Akhenaten appeared before his court with eyes that no longer blinked. "My flesh burns," he said softly. "But the pain is joy. Soon you shall all know it." He raised his hands, and the sun outside flared like a wound in the sky. Those who looked directly at it went blind. The gods had turned their faces away, but Akhenaten no longer cared. In the blinding light of Aten, he had remade himself. No longer Pharaoh, no longer mortal, but a being between flesh and flame. Yet every god born from sin demands a price, and now the Pharaoh's sacrifice would reach his own blood. By the 12th year of his reign, Akhenaten no longer resembled a city, it was a wound. The streets shimmered with unbearable heat, lined with murals depicting the Pharaoh not as man, but as Aten's twin, rays of sunlight bursting from his body. At dawn, the city's bells called the faithful to the central plaza. There priests in white linen masks dragged out convicts and slaves, their wrists bound in gold wire. The crowd chanted hymns as the condemned were placed beneath towering bronze mirrors that focused the morning sun into beams of flame. They called it the ritual of illumination. To the people, it was salvation. To the priests, it was terror. Every scream was an offering. Every shadow, a defiance of God. Akhenaten watched from the temple balcony, his once human eyes now reflecting light like molten amber. "The darkness flees from me," he whispered. "Soon there will be no shadow left in Egypt." Inside the palace, Nefertiti no longer sang the hymns she had once helped compose. Her beauty had faded, her skin marked with faint burns from the temple rites. The joy that had once lit her face was gone, replaced by a quiet horror. She still loved him, or the man he used to be. But now the man who shared her bed was something else entirely. Each night she dreamed of him as he once was, gentle, slender, smiling in sunlight. Each morning she woke to find him standing motionless by the window, naked, staring into the sun for hours, his lips moving soundlessly. One evening, she found him kneeling before a mirror polished from pure obsidian. Around him were bowls of blood, not red but glimmering faintly gold. "What have you done?" she gasped. "I have fed the Aten within me," he said softly. "Its hunger never ends." "You are bleeding your people dry," she cried. "The gods will strike you down." He turned, smiling faintly, his teeth glinting like bone. "Which gods? They have fled. I burned their names from stone. I am all that remains." She fled the chamber, heart pounding. As he whispered behind her, "Soon, my queen, we shall burn together and rise as light." In the following months, strange rumors spread through the palace. Nefertiti had given birth to twins, daughters with skin unnaturally pale, their eyes reflecting sunlight like mirrors. Midwives claimed the infants did not cry. They simply stared upward, mouths slightly open, as if drinking light. Akhenaten named them Merira and Setapenra, beloved of the sun and chosen of the sun. He decreed they were not mortal children, but vessels of Aten's purity. Their blood was to be kept sacred, their breath preserved in jars sealed with gold. Nefertiti protested, but the priests obeyed their pharaoh. Each morning the girls were bathed not in water but in oil mixed with ground quartz. They were not allowed to walk under shade. The attendant said their skin shimmered faintly, as though fire burned beneath it. At night they cried for their mother, their voices distant and hollow. She was forbidden to visit them. By Akhenaten's 14th year, the city had begun to rot, the canals ran dry. The granaries were empty. Thousands fled in secret. The few who stayed whispered that the pharaoh's palace had become a house of ghosts, that the air around it shimmered with a heat that could burn flesh. One of the royal scribes, Menkaura, left a diary hidden beneath the temple floor before he vanished. His words, later discovered by archaeologists, read, "His Majesty no longer eats. His skin gleams like gold, but his veins are dark. He walks barefoot across the stones, leaving prints that smoke. He says the sun speaks to him in dreams, that it demands flesh to remain awake." Menkaura wrote that a new chamber had been carved beneath the great temple, a vault filled with jars containing the hearts of sacrificed nobles. There the pharaoh performed rites that combined forbidden texts from the Book of the Dead with his own hymns. The scribes called it the House of Rebirth, though none who entered ever returned. One night, when the moon returned after years of vanishing darkness, Nefertiti gathered her courage. She descended the staircase to the House of Rebirth, carrying a torch and a dagger hidden beneath her robes. The chamber below was silent. Its walls were lined with golden mirrors. In the center stood a stone altar slick with blood. Around it, 7 mummified bodies hung suspended by bronze chains. Priests who had once served at 10, now preserved as eternal witnesses, and upon the altar lay one of her daughters. Moira's chest rose and fell shallowly, her eyes glazed. A beam of sunlight, reflected by massive bronze mirrors above, burned directly upon her heart. Akhenaten stood beside her, chanting softly in a tongue that twisted like smoke. "You're killing her," Nefertiti screamed, rushing forward. He turned, his pupils glowing. "She will live forever," he said. "She will be my bridge to the god within." Nefertiti raised the dagger, tears streaming down her face. "Then you will cross it alone." She slashed at him, but before the blade touched his flesh, it melted. The heat around him was unbearable. He stepped closer, and she stumbled backward, feeling her skin blister. "I loved you," she whispered. "What have you become?" Akhenaten's expression softened for a moment, almost human. "What the gods feared," he said. "What man must become?" Then he raised his hand, and the light in the chamber exploded. When the servants found Nefertiti hours later, she was lying unconscious beside the altar. The child was gone. Only a smear of golden ash remained. From that night onward, the people began to go blind. It started with the priests. They awoke screaming, their eyes burned white. Then it spread through the city. By day, men stumbled through the streets. By night, they saw visions of the sun burning behind their eyelids. The physicians said it was a plague. The old priests whispered that it was divine punishment. But Akhenaten only smiled and lifted his hands toward the blazing sky. "The Aten shines within you," he declared. "The eyes of flesh are closed, that the eyes of the soul may open." He called for the construction of the Great Mirror, a colossal circle of polished bronze placed atop the temple, angled to catch the sun's full light. The engineers warned it would melt the city itself. He laughed. "Then Egypt will melt into godhood." The next morning, as the mirror was raised, a cry erupted from the crowd. The reflected light burst forth like a second sun, engulfing the plaza. The air boiled. People collapsed where they stood, their flesh blistering, their bones cracking from the heat. Akhenaten stood unmoving at the center of it all, unharmed, radiant, divine. From the palace balcony, Nefertiti watched in silence. She did not scream. Something inside her had broken long before. When the light faded, half the city lay dead. The survivors fled into the desert, and from the temple came the voice of the Pharaoh echoing over the burning sands. "Now Egypt knows me." In the years that followed, Akhetaten became a graveyard. No crops grew. The river turned black. Jackals prowled through empty streets lined with melted statues. Akhenaten ruled over silence, his body growing thinner, his eyes no longer human. His daughters vanished one by one, their chambers sealed without explanation. And deep within the temple, the Pharaoh's hymns changed. They were no longer songs of light, but invocations to something far older, something that existed before the gods of Egypt, buried in the fire of creation itself. One surviving fragment, found centuries later, read, "Aten is not the sun. Aten is the flame beneath the world. It devours and it remembers. I am its vessel. I am its voice." No one saw the Pharaoh again after that. The light that once crowned him now began to consume him. Akhenaten had dreamed of eternal brilliance, but even the sun has its shadow. The god he summoned no longer shone upon Egypt. It burned within it. The people of Akhetaten had fled into the dunes, yet the Pharaoh's voice still echoed from the empty temples. He had ordered his priests to continue the daily rites even as their flesh blistered. When no priests remained, he commanded the statues themselves to rise and chant in their place. And then came the plague of gold. At first it seemed a miracle. The sand around the temple began to glitter faintly at dawn. The Nile itself shimmered with golden flecks. But when the first corpse was pulled from the river, its skin hardened and gleaming like metal, the city understood. The Pharaoh's god was transforming flesh into light. By the 10th day, even the air smelled of metal. Birds fell from the sky, their wings stiff. Fish floated belly up, turned to gold dust. Nefertiti, locked away in her chambers, watched the horizon glow a dull orange. "He's turning the world into his god," she whispered. and the god is hunger itself. Not all who once served Akhenaten had perished. In the outskirts of the ruined city, a secret conclave of surviving priests gathered in an underground chamber, lit only by oil lamps. Their leader was High Priest Anan, once the Pharaoh's tutor, now a gaunt figure wrapped in bandages to hide his burns. "We made him," Anan rasped. "We helped him tear down the old gods. But now he devours us in their place." The others trembled. "He cannot be killed," one whispered. "The heat around him burns arrows to ash." "Then, we do not strike him," said Anan. "We strike his god." He revealed a papyrus scroll, an ancient text, salvaged from the temple of Amun before Akhenaten destroyed it. On it was written a forbidden invocation, the rite of unmaking, a spell said to blind even the gods to perform it. They needed a heart that had been touched by the divine, and still beat with mortal blood. Anan looked toward the palace. "We will need the queen." That night, cloaked figures crept through the scorched gardens of the palace. Nefertiti met them in the hall of columns, her face half hidden behind a veil. "You risk death coming here," she said. "Death waits for us regardless," Anan replied. "But perhaps you can help us bring back the gods before your husband's light burns the world." When they told her of the rite, she grew pale. "You need my heart?" "Not yours, Majesty, his." She hesitated, trembling. "You cannot reach him. The temple walls glow with fire. No mortal can cross it." Anan unwrapped a bundle of linen. Inside was a relic, a piece of blackened stone carved with the eye of Ra. This was taken from the coffin of Thutmose. "It will drink the flame for a time." Nefertiti looked toward the temple through the open window. The great bronze mirror still stood above it, glowing faintly like an ember in the sky. "If this fails," she whispered, "then Egypt must forget him." "It will," said Anan. "We will erase his name from every stone." The next evening, a storm rolled across the horizon, rare and ominous. Lightning flashed over the desert. The priests took it as a sign that the old gods were awakening. Under the cover of darkness, Nefertiti led them through the deserted streets toward the great temple. The doors, once guarded by thousands, now stood open, melted to slag. Inside, the walls pulsed faintly, alive with heat. They entered the sanctuary of Aten, a circular chamber where the pharaoh had once performed his daily worship. There, upon a throne of obsidian, Akhenaten sat motionless, his body thin as parchment, his skin a pale gold that cracked with every movement. His eyes glowed dimly like dying coals. "My queen," he said without turning. "You come to pray?" "To end it," she whispered. "End?" He rose slowly, his voice echoing.
"There is no end."
"There is only transformation." As he stepped forward, light poured from his body, not warm or pure, but searing and furious. The priest raised the black stone, chanting the rite of unmaking. The chamber filled with the sound of wind, but not natural wind. It was as if the air itself were screaming. Akhenaten's laughter turned to rage. "You think you can unmake a god?" The light burst outward, shattering the mirrors around them. Two priests fell, their flesh turning to glass. Anan staggered forward, pressing the relic against the pharaoh's chest. There was a hiss, a sound like boiling water, and for the first time, Akhenaten screamed. Smoke rose from his skin. The golden glow flickered. His voice faltered. "What have you done?" Nefertiti stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I'm giving Egypt back its night." She plunged a bronze dagger into his side, the same dagger that had once melted in her hand. This time it held, Akhenaten fell to his knees, his blood hissing against the floor. The light in his body began to pulse erratically. The mirror shattered completely, plunging the chamber into shadow. "You cannot kill the sun," he gasped. "No," she said softly, "but I can eclipse it." As his blood touched the floor, the earth shook. Outside, the bronze mirror atop the temple tilted, reflecting the sun downward onto the horizon, and the light dimmed. The sky, once bright and merciless, began to darken. Birds scattered. The priests fell to their knees, crying out as a solar eclipse crossed the heavens. For the first time in nearly 20 years, darkness returned to Egypt. Inside the temple, Akhenaten's body began to disintegrate, not into ash, but into fine golden dust. He looked at Nefertiti, and for a heartbeat the madness left his eyes. "Beloved," he whispered, "do not let them forget me." "They already have," she said. His lips moved once more, but no sound came. His body crumbled, scattering like sand across the stones. The chamber fell silent. When dawn returned, the storm had ended. The priests carried the queen from the temple, her hands burned, her eyes weeping blood from the light she had faced. She lived only a few days more. Her final words were whispered to Anan: "Hide his name, bury his city. Let no one find the god he became." And so they did. The priests sealed the temple, buried the entrance beneath the sands, and erased every carving, every tablet, every statue that bore Akhenaten's image. His city was abandoned. The people returned to Thebes and restored the old gods. But some whispered that Akhenaten's light did not die. It simply sank into the earth, waiting. In the years that followed, strange things happened near the ruins of Akhenaten. Travelers reported seeing faint golden light beneath the dunes at night, and hearing voices chanting in languages no one remembered. When Tutankhamun, Akhenaten's son, took the throne, he ordered that no one speak the name of the heretic Pharaoh again. He renamed himself Tutankhamun, living image of Amun, to restore Egypt's lost gods. Yet in his private chambers, he kept a single amulet, a tiny gold disc with a single line carved into it. The light never dies. Centuries later, in 1892, British archaeologists uncovered the ruins of Amarna, Akhenaten's city. Among the fragments, they found a sealed stone jar marked with the royal cartouche that had been chiseled out in antiquity. Inside was a layer of fine golden dust. The lead excavator, Professor William Hayes, recorded in his diary: "When we opened the jar, the air grew unbearably hot. The lantern flames turned white. For a moment I swear I heard chanting, the same words repeating though no one spoke them." That night Hayes burned his notes. 2 days later he vanished from the dig site. His tent was found untouched save for a faint circle of scorched sand where he had been standing. The jar was never recovered. Egypt had buried his name. The sand had swallowed his city. But the sun remembers all. When mortals unearthed what the gods had sealed, the light that once devoured a kingdom stirred again. Hungry, patient, eternal, the desert wind moaned across the dunes, carrying the scent of dust and heat. Beneath the crumbling cliffs of Tel El Amarna, tents fluttered around the yawning pit of an excavation site. British archaeologist Professor William Hayes, tall and severe, stood at the edge of the trench, brushing sand from a newly exposed wall of hieroglyphs. His assistant, Dr. Margaret Llewellyn, adjusted her spectacles. "These carvings, there's no name. Every cartouche has been struck out." Hayes nodded, squinting at the faint outline of erased symbols. "Systematic damnatio memoriae. Someone wanted this king erased from history." She hesitated. "But the hymns here, they're not to Amun or Ra." Hayes ran his fingers over the chiseled stone. "No, they praise something older. Aten, who burns all darkness." That evening, as the sun sank low, the team uncovered a sealed chamber, its doorway plastered and marked with a crude warning in ancient Demotic script. "The god sleeps here. Let no man wake the light beneath the world." Hayes smiled grimly. "And yet curiosity is the curse of our kind." Inside, the air was thick and dry. The chamber's walls glimmered faintly in the lamplight, flecks of gold embedded in the plaster. At its center stood a small altar. Upon it rested a stone jar sealed with wax and marked by the faint outline of a royal cartouche, its name carved out violently long ago. Llewellyn brushed off the dust. "It's warm," Hayes frowned. "Impossible. It's been buried for millennia." The closer they moved, the hotter the air grew. The lamps flickered, their flames whitening. "Professor," whispered Llewellyn, "I think this place is wrong." But Hayes was already at work with his chisel, prying open the lid. With a dull crack, the seal broke. At first nothing, then a breath, soft, warm, like the exhale of a furnace. Golden dust rose in a slow spiral, drifting through the light. It shimmered, beautiful, hypnotic. Then the lamps went out. The desert awoke to screams. Camp hands ran toward the excavation pit, where a column of golden light shot upward, splitting the night sky. It flickered for only a moment, but when the dust cleared, the professor was gone. All that remained was a blackened circle in the sand, its edges still glowing faintly. Margaret Llewellyn, her face pale and blistered, stumbled from the trench. He touched it," she stammered. "It went into him. I saw his eyes. They were like the sun. Within days, she was transported to Cairo under heavy sedation. She spoke only once more before dying of fever, her body strangely warm even in death. Her last words were recorded by a nurse. "He's walking in the dunes. He burns, but he does not die." The expedition was abandoned. The chamber was resealed. But two men, grave robbers from Luxor, returned weeks later. Hoping to plunder what the British had left behind, they too vanished. 2 years later, a single artifact from the dig surfaced at the British Museum, a fragment of obsidian inscribed with an Eye of Ra. It was labeled Origin Unknown, Amarna Region. Dr. Arthur Penhaligon, curator of Egyptian antiquities, took a keen interest. He noted that the stone was unnaturally warm to the touch and emitted faint vibrations. That winter, strange incidents began in the museum. Lamps flared white. Gold artifacts grew hot. At night, guards reported hearing faint chanting echoing through the halls. In Egyptian, though none of them spoke the language. On January 14th, a watchman was found dead beside the Amarna exhibit. His eyes were burned white. The next day, Penhaligon locked the gallery and took the obsidian home for further study. That night, Penhaligon dreamt of a city of gold beneath the desert, its streets aflame, its people walking blind beneath a blazing sky. In the center stood a tall, emaciated figure, half man, half god, whose eyes shone like molten metal. "Do you see?" the figure asked. "They buried my light, but you will raise it again." Penhaligon awoke, drenched in sweat. The obsidian stone lay beside his bed, glowing faintly. The following week, he became obsessed. He stopped eating, stopped writing letters, and began sketching hieroglyphs on the walls of his home. His notes, later recovered, contained repeated phrases: "The flesh is the lamp. The light beneath the world must rise. Aten walks again in man." On February 2nd, neighbors reported seeing strange lights flickering from the windows of Penhaligon's townhouse in Bloomsbury. The curtains glowed from within, and a deep humming filled the air. When the constables broke down the door, they found the entire interior scorched black, yet no fire had spread beyond the walls. In the center of the parlor stood a human-shaped outline burned into the floorboards, surrounded by melted gold. No trace of Penhaligon's body was found. Only the obsidian stone remained, cracked in half. Later analysis revealed something impossible. The surface temperature of the object was over 400 degrees, yet the air in the room had been normal. The newspapers called it the mummy fire of Bloomsbury. But in Egypt, old priests who still remembered the forbidden name of the heretic Pharaoh whispered, "He has found a new vessel." The following summer, caravans crossing near Amarna began reporting lights on the horizon at night, soft golden orbs hovering above the dunes, moving in patterns like stars. Bedouin tribes avoided the area. Claiming the sands sang in the voice of a man who was not a man. In 1895, a group of soldiers sent to guard the ruins vanished. Their camp was found days later, every tent standing, every rifle in place, but all 12 men gone. Only a message scrawled in the sand remained: "The sun walks." British authorities sealed the site once again. Officially, the area was declared unsafe due to unstable excavations. Unofficially, it became known among locals as the Valley of the Burning King. In London, the curator's burned house was rebuilt. The obsidian relic, thought destroyed, disappeared from the museum's archives. But on a foggy evening in 1901, a night porter at the British Museum claimed to have seen a tall man standing in front of the Amarna display. Barefoot, thin, dressed in rags the color of sand. The porter approached and asked if he needed assistance. The man turned. His eyes reflected the lantern light too brightly. "You have brought me back to my city," he said. The porter dropped his lamp. When the guards arrived moments later, the gallery was empty, save for a faint scorch mark in the shape of a footprint. By morning, the fragment from the exhibit was gone. Over the next decades, reports of the burning man surfaced around the world. In Cairo, 1912, a warehouse of stolen antiquities caught fire. Witnesses saw a tall figure walking calmly through the flames. In Berlin, 1938, a Nazi officer collecting Egyptian relics vanished after receiving a golden disc from an anonymous dealer. In Nevada, 1954, a prospector uncovered an amulet in the desert. Its hieroglyphs read, "Light beneath the world." Days later, his home burned to the ground without a spark of fuel. Each time, investigators found the same symbol scorched into the walls, a radiant sun with 13 rays. Scholars eventually traced it back to the heretic Pharaoh of Amarna, Akhenaten. But his name had been lost for millennia, erased by decree, so how could anyone still carve it? Scene 10, The Return of the God in 1963. A young Egyptologist named Dr. Miriam Khalil reopened the forbidden ruins. Her notes, later discovered in a collapsed tomb, describe a presence beneath the sands. The air trembles. My lanterns flare. The sand glows from below as though the sun were buried under my feet. Her final entry, I hear a voice. It says, I am not gone. I am waiting for flesh. After that, the entries end. Weeks later, search teams found her dig site deserted. Only her satchel remained, inside it a fragment of obsidian still warm to the touch, engraved with a single phrase, the light never dies. Some gods die when their worshippers forget them. Others wait, patient, buried, and hungry. Akhenaten's name had been struck from stone. His city had turned to dust, but light, once unleashed, cannot be buried. And in the century that followed, the light beneath the world began to stir again. The desert wind screamed across the dunes near Amarna, where a new excavation team worked under the authority of the Egyptian Antiquities Council. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Layla Rahman, was young but known for her daring. She ignored every warning from local Bedouin tribes. The burning king walks, they said. The sands glow because his heart still beats beneath them. She laughed it off. Old myths. Myths can't kill. But when her instruments began detecting intense radiation beneath the ancient temple ruins, energy that pulsed in a perfect rhythm, like a heartbeat, her smile faltered. That night, as she studied the readings in her tent, her assistant burst in, pale and trembling. Dr. Layla, the sand is moving. She rushed outside. The moon shone over the dunes, silver and calm. Yet the sand around the excavation pit was rising, swirling upward in a slow spiral. From beneath came a faint golden light. Layla's radio hissed. The air grew unbearably hot. Then came the whisper, a voice not through the air but inside her skull. You opened my tomb. By morning, the desert was silent. The team was gone. Cairo's satellites captured a brief, blinding flash from the Amarna region, a burst of electromagnetic energy that fried sensors across half the desert. When investigators arrived 2 days later, the camp was intact. Every tent, every tool, and untouched. But there were no bodies, only footprints, burned into the sand, glowing faintly gold. They led east toward the rising sun. One of the investigators found Dr. Layla's recorder buried in the dunes. The final audio file was garbled by static, but fragments were clear enough. He's not in the ground. He's everywhere. The light is inside. Then a burst of heat warped the tape beyond recovery. That night, the satellite images showed a strange anomaly. A perfect circle of light, 30 kilometers wide, glowing faintly where the excavation once stood. To scientists, it was an unexplained solar reflection. To the Bedouin who still whispered his name, it was the city of Akhenaten reborn. In Cairo, museum curator Dr. Karim Al-Hassan examined a new artifact brought from a private collection in London. An obsidian fragment cracked neatly in half, its surface etched with the eye of Ra and scorched fingerprints. The British sender's note read only, "This belonged to the man who burned in Bloomsbury. Keep it in the dark." Karim placed it under a scanner. The screen filled with noise, then blinding white. The power went out. When lights returned, he found a handprint burned into the table, still smoking faintly. That night, Karim dreamed of a tall figure standing at the edge of the Nile, a shape of gold and fire. The voice that spoke was gentle and terrible all at once. "You know my name. Speak it." Karim whispered it before waking, trembling. The next morning, the museum's solar glass shattered inward. Visitors screamed as a figure walked calmly through the shards, barefoot, thin, wrapped in linen that glowed faintly from within. Every security camera melted. Witnesses reported that the figure touched the Amarna exhibit, and the golden mask inside began to melt, not from heat, but from reverence. The figure spoke only one sentence before vanishing. "My city remembers me." Within weeks, Egypt was plunged into chaos. Power plants near Minya failed as solar panels exploded in surges of white heat. The air shimmered over the desert, and reports flooded in of a man made of light walking the highways at night, leaving trails of molten glass behind. Those who saw him up close described his face as inhumanly beautiful, like the sun seen through tears. But all went blind within hours. Satellite photos captured the phenomenon. Only once, a glowing humanoid figure, surrounded by concentric circles of heat distortion. The scientists dismissed it as solar interference. But one anonymous researcher attached a single handwritten note to the file. This is not interference, it's worship. The glow at Amarna grew day by day. Pilgrims began arriving, hundreds then thousands, drawn by dreams of the burning man. They called themselves the children of Aten. They said he promised salvation through light, a world without shadow, without sin. When journalists arrived to investigate, they found a city forming in the desert, tents arranged in a circle, all facing a massive glowing column that rose from the sand like a living sunbeam. Inside that column, something moved. Witnesses claimed to see human shapes suspended within it, their mouths open in silent song. Then, on the seventh night, the column erupted. The sky turned gold. The heat scorched the horizon. The sand itself melted into glass. When the light faded, the camp was gone. Only a crater remained, perfectly round and smooth, radiating warmth. And at its center stood a single figure, Akhenaten reborn, radiant, beautiful, monstrous. His body was made of shifting gold. His eyes burned white. He spoke not in words, but in a voice that filled the air like a storm. They tried to bury me. They thought shadow could conquer flame. But the sun does not die. It waits, the resurrection of the burning. Pharaoh sent shockwaves across the world. Drones sent over Amarna melted, mid-flight. The area was declared off-limits, though satellite photos showed an expanding golden field that grew 1 kilometer wider every day. Within that radius, the ground shimmered. People caught inside simply vanished, leaving only silhouettes burned into the earth. At the epicenter, Akhenaten built his new city, not with stone but with pure light. It pulsed alive, a mirror of his old Akhenaten. He sat upon a throne of glass, his voice echoing through the air. The gods who denied me are gone. I am the flame beneath the world. Come to me, children of darkness. Be purified. And people came. They came in planes, in caravans, in ships. They came because their dreams called them, because the warmth felt holy. But those who entered the light never returned. In Cairo, Dr. Karim, now blind, his skin marked with faint golden veins, broadcast one final message to the world. He is not a god of the sun. He is the sun that devours gods. We must bring back the night. An international coalition attempted to strike the Amarna site with nuclear payloads. None detonated. Their circuits fried midair, melted by intense solar radiation. But the explosion was unnecessary. The Pharaoh had already seen what they planned. The day the bombs fell, the sun itself dimmed. The world entered a total solar eclipse, one that did not end. For 7 days, the earth lay in shadow. People prayed. Others burned candles that would not light. Then, on the 8th dawn, the sun returned, but its light was wrong. Too white. Too still. Those who looked up saw faces in it. Archaeologists in the future will find no trace of Amarna. Where the desert once lay, they will find a glass plain stretching for miles, smooth, seamless, still warm to the touch. Somewhere beneath that glass, sensors detect movement, a pulse, a rhythm, a heartbeat. And when the sun sets faintly, for just a moment each year, the glass glows from below. Whispered through static, ancient and familiar, comes a voice. You cannot bury light, you can only feed it. Then the glow fades. The desert sleeps, and the god who became sin, the Pharaoh who devoured his own soul to burn like the sun, waits once more beneath the world, patient as ever because light never dies.